Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Kato and I am so happy to be back with another video today. It's my second video today. If you didn't see my full overview of the Spellbinders club kits of this month, you can check that out. I will leave it linked in the description below. But here is one of the cards that I made and I'm going to show you the full tutorial for it. So this is made with the large die of the month. It's a trifold card and I really wanted to show you this card because this wasn't my plan. So I think it's a perfect way to show you how easy these cards are to make because I did them on the fly. I didn't do any real measuring for this. I eyeballed most of the things and it turned out pretty cool. So the first half of this video is going to be preparing all the pieces. So if you're wondering how the dies come together and how I ink blended some of these pieces to give them shading, you can watch that part as well. I think it's interesting. That's why I left it in the video. But if you're just looking to see how I made the trifold card design, I will leave the exact timing in a comment down below the video so you can click on that and go straight to me assembling this card. But it's going to be around the halfway mark anyway. So you could skip ahead to there if you just want to see the trifold card come together. Now for all of these little pieces, I used mostly Concord 9th cardstock. I really love the color selection, especially for fall actually, because they have some beautifully muted oranges and muted greens that are just beautiful for fall. I really love them. And I also use the Concord 9th inks. I think they blend really nicely and they work obviously very well with their cardstock. So I just try to use the next shade up of the ink if I want to add some shading to the cardstock. There are tons of tiny pieces here, and that is actually the problem. Not that they were fiddly to do or anything like that. I love doing that. Like the sunflowers, you don't have to layer them up, but I cut 2 layers and I shaded them both and then I layered them up and I think they look a lot better that way. So I love doing things like that. I don't mind the fiddly bit. It's just that I cut way too many pieces. The problem here is that I followed the example on the back of the packaging from Spellbinders, not followed it as in I was going to copy it. I don't love copying card ideas, but just to get a general sense of where I was going with this card. And then I realized way too late that their example was a 5x7 card. And I don't make 5x7 cards. I don't have envelopes to send them in. So I had way too many pieces to fit onto a regular A2 card. And that is why I made the trifold card design. And it all worked out in the end. It was really fun to do. This all together took me an hour to make. So it's not a quick card, but most of that was ink blending and cutting all the pieces. And actually the part I fiddled with the most was the background pieces. I'll show you that in a second, but cutting those was just a lot of eyeballing and laying my my pieces on my card and figuring out where everything should go. So just figuring stuff out was from like the layout of the card was the most time consuming for this card. It's not actually putting the trifold together. That is 2 minutes max. It's super easy. So these pumpkins, they're really tiny, so it's a little bit hard to see maybe, but they're so fun. So it's a bunch of 3 pumpkins and the stems all cut out together, so you have just a little stripe of green with 3 little stems on top, and that's where you glue the pumpkins on. I did cut one of those pieces apart, so I had 3 separate pumpkins, so you could do that as well. But it's very nice because the pumpkins are so tiny that they really thought about that with the design of the stems, and it's really easy to put together. The trees are so fun. So there are 2 leaf clusters, and I cut each of them twice for 1 tree. So you probably want to cut at least 2 pieces of each foliage for 1 tree. Now here I'm starting to work on the background, but the background is just more paper piecing really. So I am just doing the same ink blending. I'm doing very minimal shading for the background, nothing too dramatic, because it is the background. If you really want to distinguish between focal images and your background, just make sure that your focal images look more dramatic. Add more shading, add more highlights, add more contrast to your focal images than you do on your background pieces. Now, this one is a little bit too dramatic looking at first, but you'll see where I'm going with it, and it all comes together in the end. So that is the path, and that piece definitely took the longest to figure out how exactly to cut it, but just play around with the dies and your layout for where your barn goes and where your path should end, and just play around with it and cut a couple pieces. It's just paper. You're not going to waste a ton by just cutting a couple of different paths just to figure this out. Now, the most important part of this trifold design is to not glue anything to your card base until the very end. That's the trick here. So I am working on an A2 sized panel. It's the blue panel right in the back, the sky. So yes, this card is very thick because that is already 4 layers of cardstock put together, at least at the bottom. At the top, it's just 1 layer. But yeah, and I also cut 2 separate pieces, and those are going to be my trifold. Now, I put a score line on each of those pieces, and it's helpful, but because the card is so thick, you're going to still have to work to fold that piece around all of those layers of cardstock. So that's what I'm doing here. That's what I'm fiddling with, just to make sure that it fits nicely and snugly around all 4 layers of that cardstock. And then you just glue it on the back of that panel, and you're going to later trim the excess off. So I did no measuring for these pieces. I just made sure they were plenty wider than my A2 size card. So I had some excess to fold over and adhere on the back of the card. And then whatever is left hanging out, you just trim that off with your scissors. I think I'm gonna get to that in a second, but I do also like gluing my pieces onto the card because before I trim the excess of that hill off, because these pieces are quite dimensional, I always add a layer of white cardstock to the back of my die cuts. So again, this is a very thick card, and that's why I trim the excess of the hill off right at the end, right after I have glued all my pieces down, because if those pieces are too thick, the hill might end up too short, if that makes sense. If you trim it off after before you glue those pieces down. I don't think I'm making sense by explaining this, but when you try it out, you'll see what I mean. So I'm just playing around with these. I did mess up with these trees, and I did end up with a little glue spot. So I think I'm just going to cut a couple more pumpkins and cover that up, and that's going to take care of it, because it wasn't looking great here with those trees, with the middle tree the highest, so I just switched them around, and that looked a little better. You see the barn poking through the trees a little bit more, and not just the white roof that looked a little weird. But yeah, I was left with a little bit of glue that you can see exposed on the green cardstock. So I'm just going to put a couple pumpkins over it, I think. Now for the first layer, well, the final layer that I'm doing here, but the first layer of the card, I am just going to adhere 3 sunflowers, and I'm going to again play around with the composition here because I also cut out a bunch of sunflower leaves and I want them to be underneath some of the sunflowers. I want them to be over top of some others. And I also don't want to trim off too much of the leaves at the edges, although I do want this to fit in an A2 size envelope. So I'm just making sure that the leaves fit nicely on this card. And once I'm happy with those, I'm just going to adhere that final sunflower on top, trim off all the excess, and that's going to be this card pretty much finished. So again, this is a really easy card to make. Like, there's no real advanced skills required. It's just a little bit of patience, like with most die cut cards. I think Funfold cards scare me. I think they intimidate a few people. So I just wanted to show this. It's really easy. You don't have to measure a bunch of stuff. I hate measuring. I always calculate something wrong and then I end up with cutting too many pieces for one card and I feel like I'm wasting paper, even though, I mean, I'm having fun with it, so it's not really a waste, but still, I always feel guilty when I measure something wrong. So yeah, this is one of those cards where you don't really have to do any measuring, so that's fun. I'm finishing that off with some pumpkins. Now, off camera, I did end up a bunch of white gel pen as well to add some highlights because I thought this card needed a little something to make those die cuts pop a little more. And that definitely made a huge difference. And finally, we can glue this entire panel onto a top folding white note card, because that is also something I don't love about the usual trifold cards, is that they don't stand up nicely, so I just end up gluing them on top of another card base. That way I also have tons of space to write a message in them, so that's nice. And the sentiment is included in this large die of the month set, so that's fun as well. It says many thanks, and I cut it from some rose gold cardstock. So here you can see it with all those delicious white gel pen highlights. It's a really simple thing to add to a card, but I think it makes a huge difference. So that's it, a really fun trifold card design with the large die of the month from Spellbinders. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're going to try a trifold card some of these days. If you want to see all of the supplies I used, or if you want to see my blog post, you can find all of the links in the description below. And you can also find the link to my club overview video for September, so you can see all my card ideas and what is going to be coming up on my YouTube channel soon. So the next videos. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!